Welcome to the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers of Washington and its monthly author showcase. I am your host, Peter Stockwell.
Brains. Brains. Must have brains. You want a snack?
Delicious, delicious.
And I'm his partner in crime, Mark Miller.
We have a bit of a different show today. This is Claw's first annual Halloween on BCAT. Mark and I have been involved in this production for over a year now, so we thought it might be a good time to make a fun show. Today, we hope to highlight some of the more horrific and nasty and ghoulish excerpts from our works of our authors and artists.
Here, I even brought a critic along to share the fun. Say hello to Ratso. Or is he also a publisher? Never mind. First, to set the mood, we will have Mark Allen read from his excellent novel on vampires, Nocturnal. If this doesn't freak you out, nothing will.
Hello, I'm Mark Allen. I'm the author of the novel Nocturnal, a book about a 130-year-old vampire who saves the life of an undercover cop who's been targeted for assassination by a murderous drug cartel. Together, they take down the cartel one bloody piece at a time. They expose a traitor within the department, and they uncover a secret buried over 100 years in the past that binds their two fates together forever. Prologue. Journal entry. Wednesday, 25 January. A damp, clammy darkness, threatening drizzle greeted me when I reanimated tonight. Nothing new there. I am always cold. I do not dream anymore. Not since I was a young man. Not since I still saw the world through human eyes, when I could still feel the sun's warmth on my face. Before I became this thing that I became. I do not blame society. I made my own decisions. I knew they were wrong. I made them anyway. And now, to the task at hand. My skill set is unique to my kind, and once these lethal, deadly skills have been taught, learned, perfected, to the point that their execution becomes a matter of muscle memory and instinct, rather than conscious thought, they never truly leave. Those skills stay with you, live within you the rest of your days. They lurk just below the surface, savage serpents underneath a thin veneer that we call civility. They're taut springs, waiting to be sprung, waiting to be called upon once again, wanting more than anything to be called upon once again. I am that glimpse at the edge of the light. I am the thing that goes bump in the night. I am vampire. Chapter 1. Rudy Valdez popped the collar up on his brown leather bomber jacket against the damp night. Drifting in from the Pacific Ocean, tonight's fog blanketed everything it touched. Standing on a seldom-used dock in a rundown section of the city, south of the high-rise hotels, but north of the naval base, he heard a foghorn, forlorn and monotonous in the distance. The foghorn certainly did not come from the Sulu Sea, a rusty, hulking 180-foot freighter currently moored at the dock. Rudy breathed in and out slowly, calming his nerves. Nights like this limited his vision and narrowed his potential kill zone. Stephen Thompson, better known to his friends as T-Ball, stepped off the ship. T-Ball was definitely feeling the effects of downing a half bottle of rot gut that he had recently purchased about an hour and a half ago. His head was buzzing, but not in a good way. T-Ball shuffled towards the dull red metal shipping containers. He leaned against the door of one of the containers to help steady himself and lit a cigarette with quivering hands. T-Ball took a drag, pulling the smoke into his lungs. The nicotine acted quickly, giving him a pleasant sensation of a spreading warmth and harmony. At no time did T-Ball notice the unholy thing less than 8 feet away from him, squatting low, knees spread, hands flat on the pavement, arms shooting down between his legs from muscled shoulders. His black, narrow eyes unblinking, the preternatural creature hunkered down, pressed against the cold metal of the rusting shipping container. Using the darkness that it knew so well as camouflage, it glared at T-Ball. The monster inhaled, its nostrils filled with T-Ball's putrid scent of disease, decay, and lack of hygiene. The creature's pale face wrinkled as it cringed in disgust. Then a malevolent, ugly smile revealed 2 fangs, refined by evolution, either by God or by Satan, for piercing through pliant flesh. If this lame excuse for a human being is the best his enemies had to offer, he was going to be done here and back home in time to watch the early morning cable news shows. A shadow moved on the main deck of the freighter. The shadow was of someone large, hulking, moving near the cargo hold main doors. T-Ball dug into the recesses of one of his pockets, pulled out a small metal-bodied flashlight. He pointed it toward the ship's main deck and signaled with 3 short bursts of light through the fog. A huge Oriental man stepped out of the darkness near the gangplank. He responded to the signal by sending a 3-flash burst of his own, then moved back, fading into the darkness once more. The creature watched the 2 humans signal each other. He shook his head in amazement. Like something out of a bad movie, he thought. What's next? Morse code? Carrier pigeons? T-Ball was still nearby, still clueless, still sloppy. The man was completely oblivious to how close to death he was. The creature glanced up at the ship, observing the Chinese man. He knew instinctively by the efficient manner in which he moved, this man was, at least in human terms, a dangerous individual. The vampire thought, wait till they get a load of me. He glanced at his wristwatch. Even in the utter darkness, the vampire eyes read the dial easily. Time to get things started.
Next, we have Diane Gardner, artist extraordinaire, with a reading from the Lives of the Undead. You ready?
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Gardner, and I'm a longtime friend, well, not really a friend, associate, that doesn't work either. I'm an acquaintance of the Peablebodies who live up on the manor, up on the hill, the haunted house, I guess the whole town calls it that. I'm a little bit concerned about what's happening in the manor. I've noticed that Gerald Peablebody, who is the son of Benjamin Peablebody, who, by the way, is a pure-blooded vampire, his son has arrived from Louisiana with his sister-in-law and son, and they've moved into the manor. I've heard tell that Benjamin Peablebody has died, that there was a storm and a lightning struck a tree next to the house, and then a limb fell off and went through the roof and struck him right in the heart. I'm not sure whether I believe that story, but Gerald came over the other day with his father's journal, and he doesn't seem to believe the story either. He thinks that perhaps his father was murdered. He came to me with his journal and showed me a passage in the journal that I want to read to you, and you can decide what you think. This is about Benjamin Peabody's estranged wife. A year to the day that my wife and mother of my sons died, I had a vision. From the other side of the planet Neptune, I looked in the mirror until the sun was so bright I could no longer see. It was then that a woman appeared, more beautiful than I had ever laid eyes on, more beautiful than my beloved Sandra, though that is difficult to admit. She told me her name, Alyssa, and beckoned me to join her. She and her sister Ellen had been forbidden to walk on Earth, and so she asked me to stay on the planet she inhabited. I could not. I have my own calling, and I left her grieving for me. I soon found out that our encounter had been real and not a vision. I had indeed traveled in my spirit, and when I came upon her again, it was much closer to Earth. I asked her how come she came to leave her home, and she told me that she fought the gods that kept her away from me. She confessed that her passion was so great for me that her mortality no longer mattered. Of course, my manly instinct gave in, and I embraced her with open arms. I had no fear of feasting on her blood the way I had feasted on human beings, for she was not of bodily form, and there was no blood to be had. Yet when we reached this meager estate where I now live, I write this account. The woman changed. I hated to see the transformation she went through when she entered the door. Flesh peeled off her face. Her hair coiled into serpents. I watched helpless. I thought she would die from entering this world, but Alyssa did not lose strength. Instead, she became powerful, energized. She insisted that we wed, that matrimony would rescue her from her predators and restore her beauty. I obliged the woman, as I felt great pity on her, for she had gone through this trauma because of her love for me. How could I know that the moment we sealed our bond, nothing in my life would be the same? Though I am immune to her powers because of my breed, no human could withstand her spell. That's why I trained my faithful and beloved servant, Richard Cottlebone, to avoid laying eyes on her, and why we have one room where the walls are made of mirrors. For her to enter that room would be a death of her, but a haven for anyone else. Alyssa cannot stand her own curse. In the parlor, Cottlebone is safe. Alyssa has the ability to hide her ugliness. When she does, her beauty is incomparable. Yet her heart is black, as is her sister's. I had no idea that from the moment we were married, I would hate her. She manipulates me daily. There's nothing in this world that makes her happy, and she seems to thrive on contempt. Her distaste for humans has become so vile that I feed only at night and have fallen away from all conversation with humans, aside from Cottlebone and the men married to her sister. If Alyssa were to read this book, as she had forced me to remove passages from some of the other journals, she would tear its leaves to shreds. Were it not for the size of the pocket diary, I am certain this record would be lost. So you see, something seems to be suspicious about Benjamin's death. And so Gerald Peabody is taking it on himself to solve this mystery. However, I'm not quite sure that Gerald Peabody is up to doing such a thing, as he has a health condition. You see, he's very hungry, and he seems to be incapable of feeding.
Next, I believe Mark Miller is here to present a piece from his science fiction series.
Cool. Hello, this is Mark Miller. Something that we don't often even think about as human beings, at least in our early days of exploration, is quite often when a culture or species shows up, we also bring along a lot of invasive non-native species. Well, of course, with the Tasha aliens invading the Earth and basically looking at us to be eaten, they probably didn't really care that much. However, sometimes when you bring invasive species along, it has horrific and unforeseen circumstances. Key West, Florida. Professor Sarah Fassbinder, now a primary teacher for some 24 children ages 6 to 16, had all of her students on the main athletic parade field at 8 a.m. She decided that a few calisthenics and a walk around the track every morning help get the children's blood flowing, as well as use up excess energy and relieve stress. 6 years of living under constant fear of being eaten, of living hand to mouth with no structured education, made it difficult for the young humans to sit still in a regular structured classroom. Plus, the older children were given the responsibility of helping and keeping track of the younger, both in and out of the classroom. Sarah was trying to reintroduce basic human interaction among non-related youngsters, many who had no contact with other children while hiding, as well as a habit of structured education. All right, young ladies and gentlemen, in the immutable words of our military members, you know the drill. Robert, lead the others in a few calisthenics. Then we take our walk around the track. I want you older ladies and gentlemen to review with the younger what the assignments are today. All right, let's get started. Sarah had forgotten how much fun it was to teach, to help educate young minds, made them think. Now she was doing what she had originally trained to do in university. Somehow she'd been sidetracked into philosophical navel-gazing and fighting the establishment rather than teaching. Then the first rock hit, and everything was frozen in time. Now, thanks to the director, she had a chance to live, to teach again. She may hate what he was doing, picking who lives and who dies at the behest of the Shah. But she could not hate him anymore. She could tell he did care about his fellow humans and did what he could to help as many as possible to survive. She often wondered if he bled inside every time he thought about the human cattle he helped condemn to the slaughterhouse. A blurred form entered her peripheral vision, and at first her mind said dog. Then she saw the six-legged horror. It must have been hiding in the drainage ditch on the edge of the field. It did not really matter where it came from, as it reached an 8-year-old girl and literally clamped its wide mouth over the complete upper torso. Sarah screamed and charged the creature. No weapons to fight a clawed and toothed predator, she did not even think. She was a mother cat protecting her young. The screams from across the field grabbed Major Grant's attention. She was cutting across the field en route to meeting in a nearby office. She was trying to get caught up on a few projects while the boss was away, as the director could be a major distraction. Now, everything was forgotten, except for the word eater. The creature was a duplicate of the two that had been filmed trying to eat Kathy Morgan. 6 limbs, 2 ended in clawed hands, with a huge oversized mouth full of teeth. They got their name because they lived to eat, and now this one was eating a young girl. Jane automatically ran towards harm's way. She was military, which was her job. Part of her said, "You dumb bitch, you have no weapons. You're dressed in blue uniform slacks, blouse, and low quarters. What are you going to do?" The other part said, "Find a weapon." In between her and the children was a 5-foot metal fence stake, the type used to secure temporary wire fencing. It was still stuck in the ground, apparently used to mark some pre-measured distance on the field. She grabbed it and tore it from the ground. By rights, that was physically impossible. Even a fit 135-pound Zoftig female should have had difficulty pulling a metal rod out that had been pounded over a foot into the ground. But call it divine help, the fight or flight response that causes overproduction of adrenaline, or whatever gives humans the ability to lift 2,000-pound cars off of their kids. Jane had it. Jane grabbed and yanked the fence stake out in one motion, just as Sarah threw herself at the eater. The professor screamed, scratched and clawed at the body of the horror, until a blow from one of the limbs caught her on the edge of her jaw, cold-cocked her. 2 of the older boys rushed the eater as this happened. A flick of one of the forearms flipped quill-like hairs off its forearms, impaled the skin of the approaching boys, just as porcupine quills impale an attacking dog. They screamed in pain, temporarily halted in their assault. One of Jane's old boyfriends, dead some 6 years, had completed in a javelin throw in college. He had taken her to the sports field when he practiced, and she had tried it a few times. While not good enough to compete, she had not been bad. Now, everything it had showed her came back. The eater, the 8-year-old girl stuffed into the expandable stomach, was looking for a place to depart so it could digest its meal. Just as it began to move, the fenced stake javelin slammed into the corner of its large right eye. It let out a howling scream no one at the scene would ever forget. Then Jane was on top of it. She threw her whole weight onto the stake, driving it through the eye into what passed through the brain of the creature. It shuddered, regurgitated its last meal, and died. Jane started to grab the regurgitated girl and then screamed his pain as her hands were singed by stomach juices from the eater. One of the older boys ripped off his sweatshirt and tried to wipe off the girl's face. The flesh began to slough off the skull. The boy turned around and vomited. Jane grabbed a radio phone from her pocket and began screaming into it. "Eaters! At the sports field. Everyone get here, now!" She heard Sarah begin to her scream. "Susie!" Somehow she tackled Sarah and held her down, keeping her from the digestive acid-covered body. Before we finish up today, we have to get comments from our critic, Ratso. So, Mr. Ratso, what do you think?
I think this sucks.
Out, damn spot! Out, I say!
Well, now that we've taken care of the critics, I think it's about time to wrap up this very special show. First off, other special broadcasts, we hope. We at Claw have as a mission statement to help authors and artists become known to the public, to expose their artistic endeavors to the residents of Kitsap County and to the world. Thus, we plan to continue this endeavor as long as the Bremerton Kitsap Access television staff and the viewing public support us.
Claw exists for the artists, the authors, to help with marketing, distribution, and publicity. We meet the first and third Wednesdays of every month at the Family Pancake House on Wheaton Way in Bremerton, Washington at 7 p.m. All are welcome.
But we are not the only group out there. There are many independent writers and critique groups in Western Washington.
Vincent at 724 Studios on 724 B Street in Port Orchard. It's not only showcasing painters, but is also sponsoring local authors reading their works. Peter and I were there on the 14th and 28th of October doing just that.
As always, Claw can be only found on BCAT, Channel 3 on Wave Cable, and Channel 12 on Comcast. Keep in touch with our Facebook pages for updates on what Kitsap author we will be interviewing in the future. I hope everyone has a pleasant day and a productive and fascinating year. Until next time, I am Peter Stockwell with Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers in conjunction with Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. Mark, good day.
Brains.
What was it his brother used to do? Rockford had been so good at catching defenseless victims with no forethought whatsoever. If he waits one more second, she'll flee. Gerald reached out, grabbed her hand, stood and pulled her close to him, his lips curling up over his fangs, his head bending toward her neck. She screamed, slid from his grasp, shoved him against the bench, and kicked him in the shin. He squawked and doubled over, his hands caressing his leg. "You scoundrel!" She picked up his cane and hit him once in the leg and again over the nape of his neck, and then smacked him across his shoulders before tossing the walking stick on the ground and running out of the park. Gerald sank back onto the bench and rubbed his wounded leg, groaning. When he straightened, a spasm of pain raced across his shoulder blades. He pulled out his hanky and wiped the drool from the corner of his lips. "You're no vampire, Gerald Peetlebody," he said to himself. "You bring shame to your father's name." Standing was difficult, and even harder when he tried to straighten. He remained bent over, grappled for his cane and eased himself upright enough to lean on his walking stick once it was in his hand. The journey home would take more effort now than if he had never stopped in the park. Where did he get such wild ideas?
In San Diego, America's finest city, a war rages on both sides of the border over drugs and the money that comes with it. It breeds savage violence and brutal death. They thought they'd seen it all. They were dead wrong. Nocturnal, the new novel by Mark Allen. Available in paperback at createspace.com and through amazon.com. Available exclusively through Kindle for ebook. On sale now.